This is the final review video from Ava, Richard, Colby, and Jeffrey. Our areas for improvement are covering more info on women and minorities, and including more image descriptions on the slides. In the beginning years of engineering, most work was done by individuals, with corporations only existing for large projects such as canals. In later years, there is a transition to mostly corporations. This has changed because many of the technologies that exist now are on very large scales. For instance, telephone companies. This increase was a good thing in many ways, with corporations allowing for a huge increase in technology advancements as well as how available this technology was. Inventions such as cars became cheaper and available to everyone, and the production of these products created many more jobs. However, corporations had their downsides. These large companies usually focus on making money rather than supporting their employees and improving the social good. They also tend to create wealthy business owners, but not so wealthy employees, while also harming the environment with the large scale of their production waste. One of the changes that this rise in corporations brought about was the increase in management roles in engineering. The field of engineering has more people in management than most other fields. While some argue that engineers in management are no longer engineers, many still choose to become managers due to the higher pay and the ability to add technical experience to company decisions. The fact that most of these workers, even if they create groundbreaking technology, will remain anonymous and forced to listen to their superiors is not discouraging enough to many engineers who continue on to management roles anyway. This brings up the topic of how everyday workers are affected by engineering.
Thank you, Ava. Let's take a brief look at how relationships between engineers and the workers they supervised evolved during the first half of the 20th century. Most engineers desire to become managers, but also start out as laborers. What did it take to move up in the engineering ranks? Laborers worked long hours and often in poor conditions. It took political reform, in the shape of labor unions and the New Deal, to help fix these issues that were recurring in sweatshops, factories, and meatpacking plants across the country. During this time, the rise of the scientific method, created by Frederick Winslow Taylor, took shape in how to control laborers' every move, how quickly and efficiently a laborer can do a job, often with extreme work ethic. While it may have helped to benefit pay rates, it stripped workers' autonomy and cast aside skill sets. Now, let's look at engineering and politics. Most engineers do not enter into politics during this time, but one example was Herbert Hoover. Hoover was a successful mining engineer in Australia and Asia. He was also a successful consultant in the early part of the 20th century. He was a huge participant of humanitarian aid during World War I and eventually became Secretary of Commerce during the 1920s. He was elected President of the United States in 1928 and tried to bring the United States out of the Great Depression by suggesting voluntary cooperation and capping prices. While his plans never came to fruition, and he eventually lost the next election, he was an interesting example of an engineer getting into politics. Moving on to engineering and the military before the Cold War, we see an era of advancement in military engineering. This is a time where we see innovations with building guns by using interchangeable parts versus building the entire gun at once. We also see the emergence of land grant colleges and factories, which help to stimulate the growth of engineering as a practice. During the First and Second World Wars, we see an arms race between multiple nations, which create advancements in aircraft and radar. We also see the dawn of the atomic age as the first nuclear weapons are developed. Now, on to you, Colby.
Engineering during the Cold War. At the conclusion of World War II, many individuals identified the need to continue development of offensive and defensive weaponry. Fears centered around Russian advancement in nuclear technology sparked a fundamental change in the field of engineering. The government increased research and funding significantly, which gave rise to the university industrial complex. Research led to various projects, some successful, such as the ARPANET, while others was not as successful, such as the SAGE project. The research projects increased in size and scope while fundamentally redefining the management style. Although research projects drove forward the military weaponry, Eisenhower cautioned that the need for balance. He stated, "Good judgment seeks balance and progress, while lack of it eventually finds imbalance and frustration." Moving into ethics and Cold War engineering, this section looked to answer 3 questions, focusing on both the good and the bad. First, did the advancements make the world a safer place? Well, nuclear proliferation increased, but it gave rise to the concept of the mutually assured destruction. The second was, what was the opportunity cost? Well, basic education was neglected, but research gave rise to technological spin-offs. And the third was did the universities undercut their claims to the public good? Well, a lot of research universities focused on developing weaponry, but it gave rise to other research opportunities. Moving into Module 4, Politics of Algorithms, this section identifies the political atmosphere regarding algorithms. Algorithms are designed by developers who are supported by companies, and therefore sometimes these algorithms exhibit potential biases. These biases can range from favoritism towards paying customers to making the more powerful richer. Algorithms sometimes have unintended consequences like privacy invasion from facial recognition to reinforcing gender roles such as in Alexa and Siri. As Melvin Kranzberg had stated, algorithms are neither good, bad, nor neutral. Now on to Jeffrey.
Thanks, Colby. Women in the early 20th century were allowed into technical fields, but with little room for promotion. On the right can be seen Dame Stephanie Steve Shirley, who needed to go under the pseudonym Steve so as to sell her programming software to male patrons. Here are some notable minorities in engineering: Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, known from the movie Hidden Figures, where they helped with calculations for spaceflight. They are flanked by Macy Jemison and Ronald McNair, other minorities that were astronauts. Blockchain cryptocurrency Bitcoin is under much scrutiny because of the energy use the server farms is soaking up. To mine a Bitcoin gets ever increasingly difficult to find, as can be seen in the chart below, where it exponentially starts to rise in 2018. And this will never get any easier. E-waste also is running rampant because major tech companies want to sell more hardware instead of software, which would be able to upgrade phones internally without having as much waste produced. And as can be seen with the e-waste recycling, that is very inhumane to the people that are doing it and to the environment around them. Two major problems that's on the internet and commonly on social media are hate speech and fake news, which with fake news it's very hard to discern what the truth is. And hate speech goes against First Amendment rights, where it is very brutal and oppressive to whomever it's said to. And lastly, here are two satirical cartoons that touch on tribalism and how algorithms and AI may be replacing our jobs. And that wraps up our presentation. Thank you very much for viewing.